Hey everybody, Alex Miller at Capnion here. We're getting late in the week now, so I'm going to get a little bit more philosophical, and I have something of a critique, or maybe just some worries or concerns or speculations about our culture of innovation and how to do it. I think, A, we talk about this word all day. And we really wouldn't be doing this if we really believed we were good at it and we knew what the sauce was. You don't hear people talking all day about how to make sure the office bathrooms are clean. That's a solved problem. So a lot of chatter about something is always really an indication that we could be doing better. I also know that some of you out there have probably been in a room where you heard this word 400 times and it felt a little bit like farce at the end. You don't have to out yourself. I think a lot of us have had that feeling at times. I see an idea out there in various forms that innovation happens when you have a real stable environment. You've got, guaranteed ongoing investment in R&D, and you've got these benchmarks and plans, and you're holding people accountable. And I especially want to emphasize on the policy level that we seem to implicitly believe that when everything is really smooth and stable, we're going to do all this cool innovation. I would say the lesson of history is exactly the opposite, where times of stability, and it's much easier to understand in retrospective than in the moment. Historically, all of the real heavy-duty innovation happens in chaotic times when everything is a mess, and not a whole lot happens in times of stability. I'm going to give a couple examples in a minute. I would also point out we have this folksy saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And stability and sort of that sort of story certainly doesn't produce a whole lot of the psychology of necessity. But anyway, here are my examples. So you've probably heard of the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. Maybe our implicit common belief is embodied in a classic PC game like Sid Meier's Civilization, where you're using bronze, you've got some people looking for cool new metals. After you invest enough in them looking for cool new metals, you know how to make iron, everybody sees that it's better, and then you switch. This is not remotely what happened. What happened was people were having a great time using bronze. Bronze was very prestigious. Honestly, nobody had figured out how to make iron shiny yet, and people didn't know that it could be shiny, so you wouldn't be caught dead with an iron sword. People started using iron because civilization kind of broke down at one point, and the boat that used to show up with the tin to help you make your bronze with copper stopped showing up, and copper was real soft on its own. You were kind of screwed. That was when people figured out how to start using iron, and that was a really awful time. One of the most awful and chaotic times in recorded human history, probably. And I'm really talking about the Eastern Mediterranean and that part of the world here. So once again, this period of stability, people kept doing the same stuff using bronze. This period of misery and chaos, people had brainstorms about new metals. On the flip side, in the late Roman days, the first few centuries AD, they actually had a lot of remarkably modern-looking technology, including primitive steam engines, actually extremely sophisticated analog computers. And what's very striking to a modern observer is that they didn't really do anything with these inventions very much. They were mostly used, as I understand it, to make kind of curiosities that would be involved in religious ceremonies and performances in temples. They certainly didn't have any idea like you would use the primitive steam engine to replace human labor or anything like that. And my understanding is that the feeling among modern historians is, well, the people in charge in those days were having a great time. There was pervasive slavery. Like, labor cost was not a problem that they had. And it tends to be true that if there's a real stable gravy train, that makes people very conservative about changing anything. And people didn't want to change anything, and these inventions sat on the shelf and just went away. Didn't even really make enough of a splash. It was all that easy to find them in the archaeological record. I think in some of our more candid moments of self reflection, we know this. People talk about the innovator's dilemma. In stable good times, usually the people that make the decisions are enjoying stable good times the most. Innovation is really something that presents a problem. And I wouldn't quite say I can tell these stories about modern times. I think it's much more complicated. Like, are we in a stable time or an unstable time for the purposes of computation? I don't know. But the same problems are there of a new invention that makes everything different. It's not necessarily something you like if you're already riding high. So to recap, where does innovation really come from? Historically, chaos and misery, I think, is the verdict. Especially innovation that kind of gets out and changes the world versus sitting somewhere in a lab or on a desk. And that is really not what our ideology of innovation and where it comes from looks like. I think that's some interesting tension. I'd love it if it stimulated some thoughts and you put them in the comments.